The mutual funds, the annuities, the yields, all that stuff is kind of the same.
I think there's a given that most products meet a minimum standard that brings them all to a level of performance that we should expect.
And there's a quality and excellence in those that we expect.
Yeah.
So therefore, when you're working with an advisor, all of those pieces have to be good and excellent and in place. But what's the differentiation? And it's you and your voice and how you show up.
Today we get another flavor of wholesaler branding. Every wholesaler has their own brand. Some know it, most don't. But the advisor in the room feels it instantly. Your brand, named or not, is already shaping the meeting. Today we get Kirk Wayman's intrinsic take on personal branding, why your story, your strengths, and the way you see people is the real differentiator. Because in a world where products look the same, the meeting becomes your brand platform, and the brand is you, the truest version of yourself. Welcome to the Financial Wholesaler Podcast, conversations about meetings that matter. First of all, just introducing you, Kirk, you're my friend. You are a vocational coach working with executives, financial wholesalers, CEOs. So you have a unique angle of how we're going to speak to branding and storytelling. We're going to get into that. But give us first just an example of where you saw the shift between maybe a financial wholesaler or a financial professional where they elevated their brand beyond product branding to what we would say personal branding, and those two together launched them into a whole new dimension.
Yeah. So a number of years ago, I worked with a financial advisor in this case, and he was doing great work. I mean, it was fine. It just wasn't going anywhere. It was just sort of going along, you might say. And we sat down, we started working through this, and we really just started to discover who he is and what he's uniquely skilled at and how his voice works, you might say. And along the way, he discovered that he has this capacity, which not everybody has, to ask these really penetrating, courageous questions. Now, of course, that can get you in trouble in a lot of situations. But inside of a money conversation, when those are framed well, it really unlocks a whole bunch of things the client needs to be thinking about.
Sure.
And as he did that, he started to recognize he'd have couples sitting in front of him facing retirement, or maybe a widow sitting in front of him, or just, the kind of client that he was working with. And he began to realize that it was the women, the wives, who were really finding value and resonating with what he was doing. And would ask these questions. A lot of times an overbearing husband that maybe been in charge of the money for their whole marriage would kind of do that. And he could shape that conversation in a particular way where the wife would come alive in this new way. He didn't really know he was even doing it. That was the thing.
Yep.
But as we started to look at what was going on, and we began to realize that he has this ability to take care of a conversation about money in a way, drop it way past the money conversation. And these wives were coming alive. And then they were leaning into the closing. They were leaning into saying things to their husband like, hey, we're working with this guy. This guy gets us, which meant this guy gets me.
Yeah.
And when we looked across his book of business after a while, he began to realize that it was loaded with this type of wife, this type of woman. It might be a divorced woman, it might be a widowed woman, it might be a woman who's married, but he began to build his whole brand around this avatar, and that started to really accelerate his close rates, his ability to create incredible value. And then the coolest part of it was he started to close larger and larger clients.
Right, which we all like to hear.
It's a good outcome,
It's a good outcome, So to the financial wholesaler who we're speaking to today, why is developing personal branding so important in the world of financial wholesaling?
Yeah, I would say it's incredibly important for a financial wholesaler. And the reason is we got to look back over the last, the human experience. And we'll do this really fast. But in the human experience, we've had three major eras of economic activity. I know there's more to it than this, but just super high level. There was a period of time when agriculture, the whole economy was organized around agriculture because the central problem was everybody was hungry. And so the rulers, the leaders of the economy would own the land was the means of production, and everybody else was a farmer. In that era, we think somewhere between 70 and 90% of all humans were farmers. In that world, who you are, like how you're made and what, it doesn't matter. Grow food. Everybody's hungry. as that shifts into what we call the industrial age now. There's this economic shift that happens for all the reasons that people know about. But in that era, the means of production moved. Owning the land wasn't quite as important anymore. It was as we know, the capital, the factories, the raw materials matter. And the person who could put all that together owned the means of production. And so the machine takes over, the factory. And so now people in that era are working. They all, not all, but many move off the land into the factories. And now the basic human function is to tend or repair machines. And again, who you are doesn't really matter. In fact, we started to treat people as parts of the machine. So this is 1880s, 1900, 1920s, Ford Motor, all those stories.
Yeah.
And without going into all the detail, a bunch of industrial psychologists started to look at this process and look at how things were changing. And we began to, you can see in the literature, this expanded understanding over the last century that actually humans aren't parts of machines. I know it's silly to say now, but we began to understand that there were unique attributes. And so the human resource department is born, and processes are made, and all this stuff changes until we get to a space of the last few decades, where we're starting to recognize that just owning the machine is not enough. In fact, we like to say, at the end of the day, General Motors is the largest. They were the largest company by stock valuation. This happened in the late 80s. General Motors can lock the door to the factory, and they've locked the means of production in. But there was a moment in 88, 89 when that shifted from General Motors to Microsoft. And at the end of the day, when Microsoft locks the office building, they have some IP inside there, but how that IP got created, the means of production, clocked out and went home. You can no longer own the means of production because we begin to understand that the human is now an integral part of the value creation mechanism within our economy. Right. As that progresses forward, it's becoming increasingly clear that for more and more people, who you are is how value is being created. That you as a human, as a person, are integral to the process through which we create value in our economy. Now, it's not true for everybody everywhere. That's certainly true, but more and more that is. And so now we say that you are the product.
Right.
The product isn't, it still matters, but there's this other element. And so if we think about sales, back in the computer era, you got IBM, big company, powerful brand, lots of legitimacy in that brand, a lot of trust in that brand. And then the salespeople would just all wear blue suits. We call it Big Blue. And everybody looked the same. It was a uniform. And you could sell uniformly. Well, that broke down when Apple shows up.
Right.
And you can see this massive difference between those two companies. And now the landscape has changed. And so salespeople don't wear uniforms anymore. They have differentiation. They have different voices. And so inside of the financial world, the work financial wholesalers do, I think this is directly applicable. The products that are being sold still matter. They do.
Yeah,
the
you
brands,
need a product.
The companies matter. But increasingly, there's not a lot of differentiation there.
Agreed.
The mutual funds, the annuities, the yields, all that stuff is kind of the same.
I think a way to say that, but continue on your thought here in a moment, a way to say it is there's a given that most products meet a minimum standard that brings them all to a level of performance that we should expect.
And there's a quality and excellence in those that we expect.
Yeah.
And the companies, the 7 or 8 top companies that own some high percentage of the market are also great companies.
Yeah.
They're mildly different. And we don't like to know that. I don't know if the CEO of those companies would be particularly happy with me saying that, but I think it's true.
Yeah.
So therefore, when you're working with an advisor, all of those pieces have to be good and excellent and in place. But what's the differentiation? And it's you and your voice and how you show up.
Yeah. And whether you're a financial wholesaler or a financial advisor, you face the fact that you can brand yourself to your product name, or you can add a dimension of your personal piece to that, which we believe elevates your ability to be successful, especially more and more today.
Yep.
So what does that process look like to a financial wholesaler? Because I know this, like we can listen to a bunch of voices out there and they're not right or wrong. They're just different ways, but you approach this differently. So I'm going to set you up here. But typically someone would say, well, how do you go after your personal brand? Well, take 15 minutes. write down on a list, the 3 to 5 things that you commonly hear from people you respect. Maybe it's colleagues, it's a boss, maybe your wife, people who you respect and have influence in your life. And then write those down. And then whatever the 3 to 5 common ones are, take those, pull them out, and then write a mission statement and then begin to build kind of a story. And that is your personal brand.
That's right.
But you don't necessarily start that way for a key reason, because you like to take, in your words, you like to take how off the table and mess things up a little bit and start at a deeper place.
Yeah.
So tell us about your approach there.
So I think that approach has some value, but I
Right.
think it's kind of entry-level work. It's helpful if you've never done that before. But the work that really differentiates a person is much deeper than that. And
Right.
it's words like identity. And identity is below the brand. Your brand needs to be a reflection of your identity, and it needs to accurately reflect it, but it can't possibly be all of it. It doesn't work that way. So as you sit with yourself and you reflect over maybe the last 15 or 20 years of experiences, successes, wins, failures, all the stuff you've encountered, and you start to understand, who am I and what am I all about? Why do I exist? Which is, of course, super deep, powerful questions. Right. So we're going to sit with people and try to drop them as deep as we can go into that, because that's where the real juice is, so to speak. So we're asking questions like, what are you all about? We're doing trait personality work with people, but not just that. We're doing story work with people. We're talking about things that have hurt in their lives, things where they've learned how they've made mistakes, but embedded in that mistake was something that we can understand was a tool being used.
Right.
Not used well, but the tool's there. So we're going to walk them into that kind of work that a lot of people call identity, because that's the thing that is going to fuel a brand.
Yeah.
And the better connection you can make, the deeper connection you make with yourself, the better the brand language gets.
The better the personal brand language gets.
Otherwise, you get some generic language. Like, everybody wants to be open and curious and integrous and vulnerable. And those are good.
All the values that everyone wants to have.
Those are just virtues.
Yeah.
You're being a good human.
Yeah.
But I want you to have a specific aroma.
Yeah, exactly. And the facts are is like those also come from an outside voice, usually. We've been told by culture, by our company and their mission values that we learned when we signed on for the job, that this is what we should be like. This should be our brand. Yeah. And while that may be interesting, you're talking about, we're not abandoning that as much as we have to go deeper. And the deeper we go, the more we will integrate or will connect in a way with our personal brand. That's the most authentic.
It works the same way marketing works. In a lot of poor quality marketing, or a lot of how people approach marketing in a poor quality way, is they're trying to cast as large a net as possible.
Right.
My product works for everyone. Well, in marketing, we know if you're saying everyone, anyone, or all the time, you're saying nothing.
Right.
It's just noise and nobody can hear it. When we're doing identity work, right, sometimes what we're doing, what you're describing, is driven by a desire to fit in. I need to learn how to fit into my company.
Right.
I need to learn how to fit into my culture, how to align to it, and there's a fitting in thing. It goes back to middle school, right? Where it's all about, can I not get excluded?
Yep.
Right? Those are real human emotions that matter. Those are not inconsequential. But in this kind of work, it is about distinctiveness. Not how do I fit in, it's how do I stand out?
Right.
How am I distinctive? Not as an outcast, as a person that can create extraordinary value that benefits somebody else.
Right.
So doing this work is not about inclusion. It's about exclusion.
Yeah.
It's about subtraction. So you get to the spot where you have this unique understanding of, and in icon coaching, we call it your value creation mechanism. How are you uniquely designed, wired, created to create value and that can benefit somebody else? When we're in our early stages of our career, we pick easy stuff that is generally true. But if you want to stand out and be an extraordinary salesperson, an extraordinary financial wholesaler, you want to learn how you are different.
Yeah.
And of course, that runs the risk of being rejected.
Right. Well, you will be.
You will be.
You'll be chosen.
Correct.
And unchosen.
But it gives the opportunity to be deeply and profoundly chosen.
Well, and you're speaking to the work that John did earlier in this episode. You talked about John, where he did some of the deeper work and he got more focused. He got more specialized, is a word that Darren Cedarbuck and I talk about too, that there's a moment in your business where you have a choice to be all things to all people or to specialize. And in that specializing, you get really focused in the thing and you learn how to build around that collaborative partners, not competitors.
Right.
And in that, you hit whole new dimensions of success because you're talking about John writing bigger tickets, maybe with fewer clients.
When we're all starting out, we'll take anybody, right?
Yeah.
We'll sell anything.
As long as they have a heartbeat.
And that's fine. We largely think that's because we're just getting started. We just need any income and any activity is great. And that's true. But it's mostly because we don't know how to differentiate who is our customer and who isn't. And then over time, maybe mid-career, maybe 5-10 years in, you start to go, okay, I have a whole bunch of clients who I pretend to like, but I don't. They're not good fits for me.
Right.
They're not good, whatever the case may be. Truth is, they're probably good for somebody else. And you probably need to let them go have a nice experience with somebody else. And we start to do that specialization work. When we specialize, my question to people is, are you specializing on something that you are profoundly good at doing?
Yeah.
Because when you get that understanding of this is how I create value, then your value creation mechanism actually isn't expensive for you to deliver. It doesn't take as much prep work. You don't go home as tired. Well, you go home tired. You don't go home weary. You can show up in this way that you could do over and over.
Right.
And I have clients who will routinely say to me, I would do this for free. I'm like, that's what we're talking about.
That's when you start to find that balance. And you can tell too, like when we've done this work, and I think we do it evolves over time.
It does.
There's a branding work we can do at a younger age that's very genuine, and it's as much as we can do in that moment because that's all we know at that moment. And when we progress, we learn more, we experience more, and so now we can evolve that story a little bit better, integrate to it more. But we can tell when someone is showing up in a personal brand that's not their own.
We can.
And someone who's in the sweet spot.
Yeah.
They've done it.
Yeah.
It's almost like, and I know you use an example of this, but it's almost like those who come in telling you there's something, but they haven't really integrated with it. It's almost like they're a fish out of water. Right? It doesn't feel natural. And you use a fish analogy around that to give kind of a sense of how it can feel natural to one, but not natural to another. Explain that to us.
So it's a common phrase you'll hear people say from time to time. They say, we don't know who discovered water, but I guarantee you it wasn't a fish, right? Because a fish has always had an abundance of water in their life.
Right.
This thing we call a value creation mechanism, the way you create extraordinary value that benefits others, is built on something that is like water to a fish. But that's actually the problem. The problem is that the fish doesn't know how to describe water and can't even see it. If you ask a fish to describe their surroundings, they'll describe the stick and the mud and the rock and the leaf and the duck's feet and all that, but not water. And yet they breathe this stuff and it is sustaining their life. So the first thing in this process that we're doing with people is we're trying to get them to see water. The second thing we want them to do is then value that water. Because when they finally see it, they're like, yeah, but it's everywhere. And it's scarcity that creates value. Abundance or having enough of everything, that's just inflationary. Right. So we don't value this thing. And I remember when I was first starting my coaching practice years and years ago, I began to realize that there's a thing I was doing. And the guy I was having lunch with regularly, he was talking about it. He was saying, you have no idea how valuable this is. And I was like, you're totally correct. In fact, I can't believe you find it valuable. There must be something wrong with you. It was my water. Right?
Yeah.
So you have to be able to see it. Then you have to do the work to value it. And making claim to value in story language is deeply vulnerable. Saying this is what I'm particularly good at and learning how to do that in a way. We all hate writing cover letters, right? And saying how amazing we are.
Yeah.
It's that, but exponentially more difficult. But once you understand it and can see it and value it, it gets easier. But then there's a third step. You not only have to see it, and then learn how to value it. You have to learn how to deliver it. Because if you ask a deer where the water is, they know exactly where the water is. Fish has no idea. But the deer goes, oh yeah, because I need that to live too. And so the deer will say, okay, where's water? And the fish yells, I've got some. Like they finally understand that they have it and it's valuable. And the deer says, can I have some? And it's like, absolutely. And the fish says, put your head under and start breathing, which of course kills the deer.
Yeah.
It's a whole different journey to learn and to become a craftsman of the delivery of something that you breathe.
Yeah.
Because someone else has to drink it.
Yeah.
Right? It has to be delivered in this particular way.
Right.
And of course, you can deliver it in a way that'll drown the deer. You can deliver it in a way that creates extraordinary harm. It's that powerful.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you talk to animals. No, I'm joking. But let me ask you this. So here you go. You're talking about your value creation mechanism. You're talking about water and understanding your unique proposition. How does someone learn about what they are all about?
Yeah.
Like what are some steps that we can do? Because we can look to other people to tell us that.
Yep.
But there's also some inner work we can do too.
Yeah. The way we think about this, first of all, it's important to understand when doing self-discovery work. First thing is you are bigger, more complicated, and more interesting than you can contain. Which is to say you will never fully know yourself. You're way more interesting than that.
Right.
It's why relationships can last a lifetime. There's always something new to learn,
Yeah.
right? So the goal here is not to figure out who you are so that you are always right in how you're engaging the world, right? You're still going to have to be learning for the rest of your life. But to do this work, to do the work at the level that we're talking about, you have to have had some experience. You have to have done some things in the world because a lot of what you're going to be doing is going back over time and doing a bit of an inventory of what kinds of things have lit me up, what have I not liked. But one of my favorites is, where have I created incredible messes? Where did it all go wrong? Because often what's happening there is you're using your value creation mechanism poorly. You've used it at the wrong time, in the wrong amount. You've used it to protect yourself. The self-protective mechanisms we use are often the very thing that we are the best at because our strengths are also our weaknesses.
Sure.
Those aren't two different lists. A weakness, in my mind, is nothing more than the overuse or misuse of a strength.
Sure.
So you can look at those situations. We ask people to go into those processes and really sit with themselves and begin to dialogue about this. And it's almost like learning a language. They start out not knowing how to speak of this. And then they start to babble a bit. But as we find language for it and we find words that they like and ideas that matter, we can then start to pull this together into this idea of how you create value. And one of the central things we'll do is we'll ask them to describe this as a tool. And we'll have them go through the shop, the garage, the garden, the kitchen. Like, can you see how this tool, if you were a tool, what would it be? One guy described himself as a magnifying glass.
Yep.
Because he could recognize that he has a unique ability to see deeply into things, to really understand things at a very, very, very deep level. The problem is he'd be sitting in meetings, he was an executive, and he'd be sitting in meetings and someone would bring up an idea and he'd just look deep into it and pick the whole thing apart as though the magnifying glass was using the sun to burn it in. Like he would start fires in these meetings. Like, I'm just trying to make it better.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, dude, you're melting people down. Wrong use, right? A lot of it is strengthening someone's capacity to be vulnerable about seeing who they are and then being willing to use that to create value in the world.
Right.
Most of us have an idea of this, a functioning idea. It's just scary because if you take something that is an identity statement, that's a statement of being, and then you go do something with it in the world, it will be critiqued. It will be measured. And it feels like I'm being measured.
Yeah.
Well, that's not quite right. Getting something that has intrinsic value, out into the world where it's going to get measured and may have value, that's the doing, is that's mostly where this challenge lies.
Sure. And it's why I wanted you to speak on this topic, because you're not giving a blueprint list of how to do this.
No.
This is your approach is a lot more open. It's a little more challenging. And some people, it's uncomfortable to go, well, get to the point, Kirk. Give me the list of how do I do this, and you don't really have the list.
No, you'll end up with a generic product.
Right.
Those are fine at a certain stage of our development, but to truly get a brand, a story that has the distinction that will create the benefits we're going to talk about, it's a personal discovery journey.
Right.
But there's another piece to it.
Yeah.
You talk about talking with other people. There's a concept out there called Johari's window that everybody can go Google. It's been well documented. It's a thing from the 50s and 60s by these two psychologists, and it's a great tool because what it teaches us is that there's a part of you, part of your water that you can't actually see, and you never will, and that you have to go out into other people's worlds and get them to reflect back. And so we learn that self-discovery is a community activity. And so to actually sit down with people you know, love, and trust and ask them this question, how do you experience me? And then don't argue with them.
Yeah.
We're afraid we're going to hear all the bad stuff.
Yeah.
But often what we hear is about our greatness. And our greatness is a scary thing to hear.
It is scary.
It comes with some responsibility. So that's the other part of it is we'll have people go out and do that kind of work to get the reflection back from their community about things that they'll actually never be able to sit with themselves and learn.
And so then they do this work at a deeper level. It's more enhanced because the product is now being coupled with a personal brand. So now we're showing up stronger. But there's some story work in that too, where we take this and we learn how to convey it. We learn how to speak to it because it's not enough to just know it, but we got to show up and actually begin to articulate and identify that. How do we do that work?
So that takes, first you have to be able to, that's the delivery mechanism that we were talking about earlier. Once you can start to see how this thing works and fall in love with it, that's one of the keys. You have to fall in love with this thing. This is you. It is something that's so exciting and meaningful. It's where fulfillment for you is gonna reside. Then you have to start to learn, how do I frame this into something that communicates to somebody else what the value is? And you want to do that in specific and distinctive ways so that the people who don't want it can appropriately say, "Ooh, that's not what I'm looking for."
Right.
So I think the best way to do this is, I'll just share some of how I've done this for me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of coaches in the world, lots. And they all have different approaches and different ways they do it. And so I've had to differentiate myself in some way. And I use language like, I'm a hammer.
Like Thor's hammer?
As a kid, that was my favorite superhero because
that was mine too. I love it.
Okay, what's that metaphor mean? It's I love to pound away at things. I'm direct. There are forceful blows in how I approach this kind of work. The problem is, if the only tool I have is a hammer, they say pretty soon everything looks like a nail. And I used to hammer everything. On framing day, when you're building a house, a hammer's great. On painting day, it's awful.
Right.
So as I've learned how to use that tool at the right way at the right time, and I've learned how to communicate to people the value of a hammer, more and more people are inviting me to hammer away. And I can now use incredibly large hammers with people. Part of how I do this is I say things like, I like to poke the bear, right? Bears are these aggressive, and they got big claws and they kind of rip your head off.
Right.
And a lot of executives are aggressive with big claws. And when you communicate that I like to poke the bear thing, they know they've got a thorn in their side that's keeping them from running. And every time someone touches it, they growl a bit and people get scared. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't scare me. I'm coming after you for your benefit, which is the key. And there's a lot of people, a lot of hard-charging executives who will exhale at that point and say, okay, you can run with me, right? So that's a story I tell about poking the bear. And people are like, right, I got it. Another way I do this is I'll say, I've developed language around journeys and maps, and we talk about maps. And then I'll talk about how in every map, there's all the places everybody likes to go. And they're great places, and they navigate around. But inside of a company, you'll often find there's a spot over here that no one goes. And we call it the dark forest.
Yeah.
It's where rodents of unusual size lived. And there actually is a path through it, but it's not well trodden. And a lot of times companies get themselves stuck in a way where they can't find the answer. And because I have this intensity or this desire to poke the bear or all that stuff, it's like, we're going to walk into the dark forest because that's where the solution lies. And when the person knows that's true and then can trust somebody who can articulate that that's what I like to do, and they know it's time to do that, they're like, okay,
Right.
I'll let you guide me into the dark forest. If they don't want to go there, they're not going to say yes to that. And so you develop this language and these stories and this way of describing a thing that I not only love to do, I'm really good at, that people can exhale and go, that's what I've been looking for.
Yeah, yeah. So this is important because we believe financial wholesalers are doing important work.
Sacred work.
Sacred work. We
Yes.
do believe it. And the more than ever today, standing out needs to be something more than just the product. It's not just the product anymore. I think our financial wholesalers know it.
Yeah.
But how to do the work to maybe put themselves around the product like a wrapper.
Yeah.
One illustration I heard about good branding work, personal branding work is, one way to approach it is when you're product minded is you're like a window frame. Kind of like a window display. Mm-hmm. So someone's walking by and they can look in through the window and they see the product. It's sitting there. It's great. It's wonderful. They know what they're getting, and that is it. But converting to personal branding is like turning the window into a mirror. So now you're still using a similar device, but you've upgraded that to more of a reflecting yourself in it. So it's more than just the product, but people can see you. Right. I think it's a good way to illustrate that, because one way that shows up maybe as a financial wholesaler is we get into our routines, we get into our ruts, we're calling in for appointments, we're doing that work. And, an advisor might respond and say, all right, well, what do you got? Yeah. And that answer, we might hear it a million different ways, but it's what do you got? Why should I give you time? And our immediate response can be default is product.
Right.
It's I got this shiny thing and here's all the widgets and all that stuff. And that's an easy way to get for them to get out of that conversation, versus if we've done good story work and we're in that space, the same response to that question to what do you got is, well, it depends. Mm-hmm. If I've done good personal branding work, I can back off of that and not have to go immediately try to sell them on the product. I can actually pull back and ask them a question, go, well, actually, it depends on what you need. Uh-huh. Let's talk about that. Then they begin to go, oh, well, here's what I'm thinking. Now you can wrap into that, because you're not one-dimensional anymore. You have multi-dimensionals functioning in that.
And the key there is to move out of a safe conversation. The what do you got is trying to get into this numbers and charts and stuff, and it's really probably more like a ploy to dodge the whole thing. Right? I don't have time for you. Give me the 10-minute spiel, so I'm going to move on. But when you shift that, when you start to have conversations that matter, and conversations that matter have stakes involved. They're more vulnerable. There's room for mistakes to be made. There's room for rejection. But there's also deep room for connection. Now, you have to have conversations that matter with people who care. So not everybody's going to care. Mm-hmm. They're not your customer. But getting off of this safe conversation into what I would think is a more dangerous conversation. Right. That's one of the keys. And being confident in who you are to shift from safe to dangerous is necessary. You can't do that if you don't have a viable understanding of yourself and how to communicate it to others. Yeah, that's incredibly important. A sales process that constantly is answering the question the customer is asking is boring. Most customers don't really know how to engage the thing we're selling. Right, we do. I think of the work of financial wholesalers, we've said it a minute ago, as being very important to the point of sacred. Of course, the advisor is doing the same work. Right. And both the financial wholesaler and the advisor, from the research you've shown me, got into this for pretty powerful reasons. They are intrinsically motivated. There's usually a story going on about how they were raised. This is one I hear a lot. I was raised and I never learned about money, and my dad didn't know about money, and so I had to learn on my own. And if I'd only known then what I knew now, just think of what was possible, right? There's this mechanism, there's this whole mechanism that to some people is just some sort of magic that's for somebody else. Right. But it's not. It's democratically available to all of us if we'll engage it, right? And so there's this strong desire to help families both thrive and leave a legacy. That's awesome. And a financial wholesaler and an advisor has that in common. Right. And finding language to have that conversation, to recognize that I'm not showing up to sell you something so I get a commission. Commissions are great. love making money. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to put myself into your game. That's the skin in the game that matters.
Right.
I'm here to help you solve that problem for that family, and we're aligned in that.
Yep.
That's a conversation that matters.
Yeah. More and more, that's what's going to get you back into the office. Your product may get you in the door, but your personal brand is what's going to get you called back. Let's just be honest. It's how you showed up in the room. So if you're a financial wholesaler listening in and you're going, hey, I think I need to do some work. I need to elevate my brand. Reach out to Kirk. We put his information up at the end of this video. There's a way to connect with him. You might need a guide to walk you through what's your water.
Yeah.
You know, how do you see your unique value proposition? Begin to leverage that, empower it, specialize in that, and I think you elevate your success story to newer heights. The Financial Wholesaler podcast is sponsored by Executive Scheduling Associates. If you're looking for appointment setting services, visit our website at esasolutions.com.